Women in New York State now have some of the nation's strongest protections for abortion rights. It's all thanks to the Reproductive Health Act signed into law last night. Supporters of this new law are rejoicing, but for right-to-life advocates, this is a step back in their fight.
Abortion is a medical procedure. It is not a crime.
State lawmakers from both the Assembly and the Senate today celebrated.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo signing the Reproductive Health Act on Tuesday. It defines abortion as a fundamental right and allows late-term abortions after 24 weeks. He called it a victory for all New Yorkers.
Pro-choice activists fear abortion laws could change dramatically and soon.
We have a president who's made it very, very clear that he wants to overturn Roe v. Wade. Today, here in New York, we are saying no.
It was 46 years ago today that the Supreme Court made Roe v. Wade the law of the land. And for many years, a lot of lawmakers thought it was unnecessary to have a local law guaranteeing women the right to an abortion. But the Supreme Court has lately become much more conservative. Other states have passed laws chipping away at Roe v. Wade. So today, after a long, long wait, lawmakers in Albany moved to strengthen abortion rights in New York.
Democrats say voters put them in control to pass progressive legislation, and the Reproductive Health Act is one of the first on a long list of bills Republicans can no longer stop.
And late-term abortions would now be legal at the discretion of a doctor or other health care providers.
We're saying that here in New York, women's health matters. We're saying here in New York, women's lives matter. We're saying here in New York, women's decisions matter.
I support this act. It's crucial that we protect a woman's right to choose, particularly at this moment in history where women's rights are under attack.
Just last week, Governor Andrew Cuomo joined with Hillary Clinton to call for passage of the Reproductive Health Act.
Well, before today, New York's abortion law, it was written in 1970 before the Supreme Court decision on Roe v. Wade. Today's change will allow not only doctors to perform an abortion, but also in some cases, some of them can be handled by physician assistants and also nurse practitioners.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement again.
Tonight, a men's razor commercial without a single shot of razors.
Is this the best a man can get?
Instead, scene after scene questioning masculinity in the age of Me Too.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
After 30 years, the company Gillette giving a modern twist to the best a man can get, showing viral moments of men confronting bullies.
That's not how we treat each other, okay?
Turning the company's popular tagline on its head.
Is this the best a man can get?
And framing it in the context of the Me Too movement.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
Many customers took to social media praising the ad for its progressiveness. But now, some say the ad represents a backlash against traditional masculinity.
Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything.
Nike sales grew after its controversial commercial with former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick. But Gillette's sales impact is still up in the air.
We believe in the best in men.
Gillette, the latest big brand to create commercials around social justice campaigns. Nike courting controversy over ads featuring Colin Kaepernick. Pepsi facing backlash from the Black Lives Matter movement for this commercial with Kendall Jenner. In a statement, Gillette saying, "It's time we acknowledge that brands like ours play a role in influencing culture."
But what is going to be the mission of this new religious system? Well, it's going to be social justice. One New York psychologist by the name of Jonathan Haidt goes on to say, there is a relatively new secular religion of social justice. An atheist blogger I came upon made this comment about his observation. Now, he's an atheist, and he doesn't like religion and isn't favorable to religion, but nonetheless, he was very concerned by what he saw happening. He says, I am one of a growing number of people noticing how social justice has blossomed into a religion over the past few years and has adopted many of the most pernicious aspects of religion. An unchangeable dogma, disregard for facts, conformity, heresy hunts to weed out critics, extreme commitment to ideological purity. He goes on to say, I hate to say it, but it seems that some of the criticism from the religious may have been right. Social justice has morphed into a new ideology based on an obsession and exaggerated perceived victimhood and oppression, where getting the right gender pronouns are as important as actual racism. He goes on to say, they claim that gender is a social construct, that biological sex differences aren't real objective things. Sex and gender are all based upon ideas from patriarchal societies. There are no inherent differences between men and women. Humans, they say, are blank slates. He goes on to saying criticizing Islam is racist, that black, brown people and women are always more oppressed than white men. You're not allowed to talk about women's issues if you're a man, or talk about racism if you're white. And if you don't want to have sex with or date a trans person, you're transphobic.
Once again, ma'am. I said both of you. No, you said sir. Once again, it's ma'am.
Well, this video from right here in New Mexico is going viral online. A transgender woman losing her cool when she says an employee at an Albuquerque video game store called her sir instead of ma'am.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
It's the video seen by millions. Tiffany Moore, a transgender woman who recently started her transition, yelling at an employee inside this Albuquerque GameStop. Moore says the cashier repeatedly called her sir instead of the gender pronoun she identifies with. While she was trying to return a game she bought for her son.
Ma'am, once again, ma'am. I said both of you. No, you said sir. Once again, it's ma'am. I actually said both of you guys. This is general. Right beforehand, you said sir. Sir? Okay. Take it outside. If you want to call me sir again, I will show you a sir. I apologize now.
What's really sad is it's bringing so many bigots out of the woodwork.
But Moore, a local MC and rapper, isn't letting the memes get to her.
I would kick over that display 100,000 times again because my actions were justified. I mean, it was blatant and malicious hate. It was blatant and malicious misgendering.
In other words, he's saying this is the kind of stuff that's being pushed now. And interesting, some of the most dramatic expressions of social justice come in the greening movement, the green movement, or global warming. In fact, it began in 2000 when they held the Millennial Conference, the idea for world peace. Part of it, a big part of it, was the religious conference. They call it the Earth Summit. But what does the Earth Charter actually call for? Number one, a global partnership to care for the Earth's fundamental changes. And what's needed are the fundamental changes in our values, our institutions, and our way of living. The emergence of a global civil society is creating new opportunities to build a more democratic and humane world. Our environmental, economic, political, social, and spiritual challenges are interconnected. And together we can forge inclusive solutions and support the implementation of the Earth Charter principles with an internationally, legally binding instrument on environment and development, and to promote the equitable distribution of wealth within nations and among nations. It was Mikhail Gorbachev, the former head of the Soviet Union, now a thoroughly avowed socialist capitalist. He said of this, he says, "My hope is that the Charter will be a kind of 10 Commandments, a Sermon on the Mount that provides a guide for human behavior toward the environment in the next century and beyond." The former head of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, they're the ones who keep on issuing these reports about how the Earth is warming faster and faster, and we're pretty much going to be a beachside city within the next few decades. Rajendra Pachauri, who was formerly the head, he said, "For me, the protection of planet Earth, the survival of all species, and sustainability of our ecosystem is more than a mission. It is my religion and my dharma." The dharma means this is what I was created to do. And Pope Francis, in his first encyclical, if you're not a Catholic, or maybe you are a Catholic and don't know what it is, there is basically a statement that the Pope issues so often to outline what are the moral prerogatives, the things that are issues of today that we need to be morally focused on. And essentially, if you go against what he says, then you are declared as being an immoral person. Well, in his first encyclical, what was the very first item he said that we needed to address? And it was climate change. In essence, declaring it as the preeminent moral issue of our time. And what was noticeably absent was any reference to abortion.
It was the 76th Golden Globe Awards, Tinseltown's finest managed. They finally managed to avoid directly attacking the president at the ceremony, but actor Christian Bale, he thanked Satan in his acceptance speech for inspiring his role as Dick Cheney.
For all the competition, I will be cornering the market on charisma-free. What do you think? Mitch McConnell next? That could be good, couldn't it? Thank you to Satan for giving me inspiration on how to play this role.
Yeah, but you just refer to Satan. Hollywood wonders why their big salaries are going down and box office receipts are low. Former Vice President's daughter, Liz Cheney, fired back this morning on Twitter, posting, quote, "Satan probably inspired him to do this too." Christian Bale arrested for assault on a mother and a sister. Let me just go down the greatest hits. Let's just show our audience what I mean when I talk about Hollywood hate. Let's roll the tape.
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president? It's been a while. And maybe it's time.
How dare he say the things he does? Of course I want to punch him in the face.
Right.
We change governments here at home in an orderly and formal way. And in that orderly and formal way and lawful way, we need to overthrow the government of the United States under Donald Trump.
Allie, I could go on for an hour playing this tape. There's a lot of hatred out there. Why?
Right.
And yet, despite the obvious, we find that there is a non-logical approach to this and many other issues, because there's such a desperation in our world today to find harmony. And that's not a bad desire. Let's not mistake. We all want to live in a peaceful environment. We wish we could all get along. But the idea that that's going to happen by simply melding us together religiously seems completely out of reality. The second argument that is used for why we need to have one world religion, or at least harmony amongst them, is that religion is the chief cause of wars and terrorism. In fact, Richard Dawkins, another very famous, wrote the book called The God Delusion, and he's one of the more famous atheists making the rounds these days. He says, if religion were somehow abolished, there would be a much better chance of no more war. He adds, there would be less hatred because a lot of the hatred in the world is sectarian hatred. Now, the problem with men like Dawkins and Harris and many others is they make these very direct assertions that seem to make sense to people who don't know the facts. The facts are completely opposite. In fact, there's one organization called the Institute for Economics and Peace. In 2013, they did a historical survey of past and present conflicts, war conflicts, and they came to an interesting conclusion. They said they found no general causal relationship between religion and conflict. Only 14% of armed conflicts in history have had a religious element to them whatsoever as their main cause. And then they added, quote, having less religion in a country doesn't make it more peaceful. As we can see in our own country, as we move away from faith in Christ and biblical standards, have we become a more peaceful, friendly place to live? Has hatred gone away? In fact, I've never felt such intense hatred as from people who hate religion. Because if you become a hater of religion, then you're free to hate as you please. In fact, the Encyclopedia of Wars says very clearly, after an extensive study, they found that only 7% of wars were religious in nature. But you see, it's all a matter of what you want to profile. So if the news media wants to profile religious motivation, let's say, for example, ISIS or groups like that, then they can kind of extrapolate out that that's the general truth that applies to all conflicts. And you may begin to make the fallacious argument that if you remove religion, suddenly we would all get along together. But historically, that's not true. Basically, again, when Paul says to us that he will send them a powerful delusion, this is one of those powerful delusions. It's one of those lies that people repeat because they've heard it so often they believe it's truth. But actually, when you study the facts, it has no truth in it whatsoever.
Meanwhile, New York Democrats legalized late-term abortion and claim it's about the mother's health, which is obviously unscientific, contradicts medical fact, and is a lie. But did the mainstream media point out this lie? No, they did not. They published it. They helped perpetuate the lie.
Well, I think that Christian Bale's statement really, it typifies what Hollywood feels about conservatives and about religion, especially Christianity. They think it's laughable, they mock it, and they also hate it. And I think it also shows that their hatred, their vulgarity, really has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
Their arrogant political agenda.
Right. Well, it's just not relatable anymore. It's not just that we disagree on lifestyle. It's not just that we disagree on policies. It's truly a collision of worldviews.
But if we look at what's happening we're finding, first of all, that there's a theology that's growing in America called pluralism. It's worldwide, in fact. And the reference was made to that term a moment ago. But what is exactly pluralism in a religious sense? Well, basically, as physicist Heinz Lichlama says, all religions are equally valid. Contradictions between religious systems are fully acceptable because absolute truth does not exist. This is the effect of what we call postmodernism. And it is, as Tennyson said, nature which is red with blood from tooth and claw. We live in this savage, bestial world of natural selection. Who can complain about somebody, coming over to your house and blowing everybody away and taking all of your goods? Because actually there is no truth. Well, we know that doesn't work in real life. And one of the real things I think really helps us to understand what is true and what is not is things that are true, if followed, work out well because they're congruent with the world in which God made it. And things that go terribly wrong do so because it's contrary to the way the world has made them. And it's really a system of amorality. Another amorality means that there is no morality. There is no right, there's no good or evil. And it's interesting where this is being spoken of again.
you.